This is the first ever episode of Reciting Wikipedia. Unless I end up calling it Reading Wikipedia, then... Because there's some kind of force in me that resists making videos on things that are trending or just generally watchable, I'm kicking this off with a video about the Apple III, a very unfortunate computer. The Apple III is a business-oriented personal computer produced by Apple Computer and released in 1980. It was intended as a successor to the Apple II series, but was largely considered a failure in the market. By the way, we're reading Wikipedia. I'm literally reading it. It was designed to provide key features business users wanted in a personal computer, a true typewriter-style, uppercase, lowercase keyboard. The Apple II only supported uppercase. Yeah. That is a thing I forgot about. Later models of the Apple II had uppercase, lowercase. But up until that point, everybody with an Apple II was like your dad shouting about something. Work on the Apple III started in late 1978 under the guidance of Dr. Wendell Sander, a person who I've never heard of. It had an internal code name of Sarah after Sander's daughter, Sarah Sander. The system was announced on May 19th, 1980 and released in late November of that year. Serious stability issues required a design overhaul and recall of the first 14,000 machines produced. Damage to the computer's reputation had already been done and it failed to do well commercially. Development stopped and the Apple III was discontinued on April 24th, 1984, or late 1983. And its last successor, the III Plus, was dropped from the Apple product line in September 1985. Compare that to the Apple II product line, which started in June 1977, and it ended with the Apple IIe Platinum in November 93. That's 16 years compared to the Apple III's 5 years. An estimated 65,000 to 75,000 Apple III computers were sold. That sounds like not a lot to me. Why am I quoting myself? Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak stated that the primary reason for the Apple III's failure was that the system was designed by Apple's marketing department. Unlike Apple's previous engineering-driven projects, the Apple III's failure led Apple to reevaluate its plan to phase out the Apple II, prompting the eventual continuation of development of the older machine. And that was just a summary. How long is this disaster going to be? Design. Overview. Design overview. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs expected hobbyists to purchase the Apple II, but because of VisiCalc and Disk2, small businesses purchased 90% of the computers. The Apple III was designed to be a business computer and successor. Though the Apple II contributed to the inspirations of several important business products such as VisiCalc, Multiplan, and Apple Writer, the computer's hardware architecture, operating system, and developer environment are limited. Were limited. I mean, I guess they're still limited, but whatever. Apple management intended to clearly establish market segmentation by designing the Apple III to appeal to the 90% business market, leaving the Apple II to home and education users. Management believed that once the Apple III was out, the Apple II would stop selling in 6 months. To quote Wozniak, that's all a Wozniak quote. Where does this Wozniak quote start? Oh, yeah. Quote, once the Apple III was out, the Apple II would stop selling in 6 months. Is what he's saying management said. Not what he was saying, because he liked the Apple II. The Apple III is powered by a 1.8 megahertz Synertec 6502A or B. Oh, 6502A or B. Okay, I get it now. Okay, let's go. It has an 8-bit CPU and, like some of the later machines in the Apple II family, uses bank switching techniques to address memory beyond the 6502's traditional 64 kilobyte limit up to 256 kilobits. Kilobytes. So traditionally it has a 64 kilobyte limit, but it was able to go up to 256 kilobytes. Other Apple III built-in features include a 80-column, 24-line display with upper and lowercase characters. Remember that. A numeric keypad, dual-speed, pressure-sensitive cursor control keys. Dual-speed, pressure-sensitive cursor control keys. Like, oh, Like, so you don't have a mouse. So it's like you can go like this and you go slowly or you press hard. 6-bit DAC audio, which is still, it's not great audio. And a built-in 140 kilobyte, 5.25 inch floppy drive. So that is, we'll show what that is. Where was I? Graphics modes include, am I gonna be cutting some of this? I feel like I'm gonna be trimming this down. I don't think I'm gonna literally read everything, but that is what I seem to be doing right now. I feel like if I read all of it, this is gonna be like a 30-minute video. This will not be a 30-minute video. Anyways, blah, 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 graphics modes, whatever. Let's skip that, who cares? And yeah, but this had color, by the way. You had a black and white graphics mode. Looks like I'm not skipping it. 560 by 192. I could put some of this up. I can have like things up. I don't need to say everything. This is the first time I'm doing this kind of video, so I'm figuring out how I'm gonna make this video as I read it, because I didn't read this ahead of time. The whole point in this is like no practice. So you got high resolution, black and white, and then you got 16 colors. You got colors, but lower resolution. Macintosh didn't have color at the time. Macintosh didn't have color for a long time. 16 colors or shades of gray. The Apple III is the first Apple product to allow the user to choose both a screen font and a keyboard layout, either QWERTY or Dvorak. Dvorak is overrated. Fuck Dvorak, man. 10 years ago, I was hearing all this stuff about how Dvorak was this suppressed format and QWERTY was meant so you wouldn't jam up the keys on a typewriter and it made people type slower. Bullshit. I don't think so. Oh, well, people are typing too fast. They're jamming up the keys. They're just all over the place. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, Dvorak marketably maybe a little bit better, but it's like, do you want to buy a new car just to get 1 mile per gallon? You want to spend an extra year training yourself to learn how to drive a new kind of car? No, you can't get in this new car. It gets like 1 extra mile per gallon. You got to learn a whole new system of driving. This is like going back to driver school. I don't know where this metaphor is going, but that's how I feel about Dvorak. Overrated. Okay, bam, onto the software. The Apple III introduced an advanced operating system called Apple SOS, which is kind of confusing now when you go to look it up, because on an iPhone, you got SOS mode. So when you look up Apple SOS, you're gonna get iPhone stuff. But if you say Apple SOS operating system, then it's easier to search. Or you just watch this video, and maybe they'll actually have information. We'll see what it says. Pronounced applesauce. What? Apple sauce? Okay, here's the thing. If you're thinking, why doesn't Apple use more Apple puns? Like, you got the Apple Macintosh, and they don't acknowledge that, apples are things you eat, and they don't play off that. Yeah, you got the logo, but that's it. They did all that in the 80s. So Apple SOS was pronounced applesauce. So applesauce. Sauce. I don't like it. I'm gonna call it SOS. So applesauce stands for the Sophisticated Operating System. It's the primary operating system for the Apple III computer. SOS was developed by Apple Computer and released in October 1980. In 1985, Steve Wozniak, while critical of the Apple III's hardware flaws, called SOS the finest operating system on any microcomputer ever. Its ability to address resources by name allows the Apple III to be more scalable than the Apple II, and it supports a hierarchical. By the way, yeah, I'm not a very good reader. I don't read well. So this is an interesting choice I'm choosing for myself. Hierarchical file system. So the features and code base of the Apple sauce, I really don't like calling it that, were later adopted to the Apple II's ProDOS and GSOS operating systems, as well as the Lisa and Macintosh system software. The Apple III was more expensive than many of the CP/M-based business computers that were available at the time. Few software applications are available for the computer, according to a presentation at
Kansas Fest 2012.
Nearly 50 Apple III specific software packages were ever published. Most shipped when the Apple III Plus was released. Because Apple did not view the Apple III as suitable for hobbyists, it did not provide much of the technical software information that accompanies the Apple II. Peripherals. The Apple III has 4 expansion slots, a number that insider like cider, apple cider. I'm really sick of these Apple puns. In 1986, this pun magazine called Miserly. The expansion slots are a miserly amount. What did the Apple II have? 8 or 6, whatever. 7. Several new Apple product peripherals were developed for the Apple III. The original Apple III has a built-in real-time clock. Along with the built-in floppy drive, the Apple III can also handle up to 3 additional Disk 3 floppy disk drives. The Disk 3 is the only officially compatible with the Apple III. With the introduction of the revised Apple III a year after launch, Apple began offering Profile external hard disk system, priced at $3,500 for 5 megabytes of storage. It also required a peripheral slot for its controller card. Backwards compatibility. The Apple III has the built-in hardware compatibility to run Apple II software. In order to do so, a emulation boot disk is required that functionally turns the machine into a standard 48 kilobyte Apple II Plus. Apple engineers added specialized circuitry with the sole purpose of blocking access to its advanced features. This was done primarily to discourage further development and interest in the Apple II line and to push the Apple III as its successor. For example, no more than 48 kilobytes of RAM can be accessed, even if the machine has 128 kilobytes of RAM or higher present. Like in the thing, not like as of the present, like in the machine, presently in the machine. Many Apple II programs require a minimum of 64 kilobytes of RAM. Oh wow, that's real suck. It's totally sucks ass. So it's not like, oh, we're stopping them from making a super Apple II. They are literally making it's a forced low spec Apple II. Total suck ass, but whatever. It's not my battle. It's not my war. I wasn't part of this scene. Revisions. After overheating issues were attributed to serious design flaws, a redesigned logic board was introduced, which included a lower power supply requirement, wider circuit traces, and better designed chip sockets. The $3,500 revised model also includes 256 kilobytes of RAM as the standard configuration. The 14,000 units of the original Apple III sold were returned and replaced with the entirely new revised model. Apple III Plus. Apple discontinued the 3 in October '83 because it violated FCC regulations. The FCC requires a company to change a redesigned computer's name. So the Apple III Plus is basically the product of the recall of the Apple III. It introduced the Apple III Plus in December '83 at a price of $3,000. Basically $3,000, a little cheaper. That's good. Considering how much it sucks. This newer version includes a built-in clock, video interlacing, standardized rear port connectors, a 55-watt power supply, 256 kilobytes of RAM as standard, and a redesigned Apple IIe-like keyboard. Design flaws. According to Wozniak, the Apple III had 100% hardware failures. Former Apple executive Taylor Pullman said that there was way too short a time frame in manufacturing and development. When the decision was made to announce, there were only 3 Apple IIIs in existence, and they were all wire-wrapped boards. The case of the Apple III had long since been set in concrete. The case of the Apple III, the case, like not like the case, like we're on the case. The case, the mold, the case of the Apple III had long since been set in concrete. There's a little descriptive. Had been finished. It was finished. So they had a certain size logic board to fit the circuits on. They went to 3 different outside houses, and nobody can get a layout that would fit. They used the smallest line circuit boards that could be used. They ran about 1,000 of these boards as pre-production units to give to dealers as demonstration units. They really didn't work. Apple swapped. They really didn't work. Apple swapped out the boards. The problem was at this point, there were other problems, things like chips that didn't fit. There were a million problems that you would... Is this a quote? There were a million problems that you would normally take care of when you do your pre-production and pilot run. Basically, customers were shipped the pilot run. Yeah, this is a full quote. Okay, I get it. It's that guy, whatever his name is. Yippee! Steve Jobs insisted on the idea of having no fan or air vents in order to make the computer run quietly. Jobs would later push the same ideology onto almost all Apple models he had control of, from the Apple Lisa, Macintosh 128K, to the iMac. to allow the computer. So, yeah, but the iMac had vents. Like, there's holes in the back, but whatever. To allow the computer to dissipate heat, the base of the Apple III was made of heavy cast aluminum, which supposedly acts as a heatsink. Have we proven that? Have we proven that yet? Wikipedia. One advantage to the aluminum case was a reduction in RFI, radio frequency interference, a problem which had plagued the Apple II series throughout its history. Later, it was realized that there was not enough room on the motherboard for all the components unless narrow traces were used. Many Apple IIIs were thought to have failed due to their inability to properly dissipate heat. Insider stated that in 1986, heat has always been a formidable enemy of the Apple III, and some users reported that their Apple IIIs became so hot that the chips started dislodging from the board, causing the screen to display garbled data or their disks to come out of the slot melted. The integrated circuits tended to wander out of their sockets. It has been rumored Apple advised customers to tilt the front of the Apple III 6 inches above the desk and then drop it to reset the chips. So you'd be going like this, like boom, dislodge those chips or relodge them. Other analysis blame a faulty automatic chip insertion process, not heat. So I guess we still don't know to this day. Cold case. Case designer Jerry Mandock denied the design flaw charges, insisting that tests proved that the unit adequately dissipated the internal heat. Yeah, he would. Of course he would. Who did those tests? Jerry Mandock did those tests. The primary cause, he claimed, was a major logic board design problem. The logic board used fine line technology that was not fully mature at the time, with narrow, closely spaced traces. When chips were stuffed into the board and wave soldered, solder bridges would form between the traces that were not supposed to be connected. This caused numerous short circuits, which required hours of costly diagnosis and hand rework to fix. Apple designed a new circuit board with more layers and normal width traces. The new logic board was laid out by one designer on a huge drafting board rather than using the costly CAD/CAM system for the previous board, and the new design worked. Earlier Apple III units came with a built-in real-time clock. The hardware, however, would fail after prolonged use. Apple was soldering chips directly to boards and could not easily replace a bad chip if one was found. Eventually, Apple solved this problem by removing the real-time clock from the Apple III's specification rather than shipping the Apple III with the clock pre-installed, and then sold the peripheral as a level 1 technician add-on. Basic. The operating system. Microsoft and Apple each developed their own version of not operating system, like programming. Basic. Apple III Microsoft Basic was designed to run on the CP/M platform for the Apple III. Apple Business Basic shipped with Apple III. Both languages introduced a number of new or improved features over AppleSoft Basic. Both languages replaced AppleSoft's single precision floating point variables using 5-byte storage with the somewhat reduced precision 4-byte variables, while also adding a large numerical format. I should make sure. Sometimes I gotta check to make sure I'm still recording. I'm gonna skip a bunch of stuff about Basic because I feel like it's like over proportioned to what I'm actually trying to go for. So whatever, you're into the Basic thing, there it is. Reception. We probably put $100 million in advertising, promotion, and research and development into a product that was 3% of our revenues. Think what we could have done to improve the Apple II, or how much could have been done by Apple to give us products in IBM's market. So like making something else. Okay, I pushed up my invisible glasses here and let's reread that. So we put a bunch of money into making the Apple III and making people want to buy it. It was only 3% of our revenues. If instead we had spent our time improving the Apple II and creating new products that would have competed with IBM, which I guess they're talking about getting into the business market, like just imagine Steve Wozniak, 1985. The IBM PC's successful launch had encouraged the software companies to develop for it instead, prompting Apple to shift focus to the Lisa and Macintosh. By early 1984, sales were primarily to existing III owners. Apple itself, they were selling. So people who were buying Apple IIIs were either people who already had a fleet of Apple IIIs, or Apple was like, somebody, we gotta buy these things. Let's give them to all our employees. Give all our crappy computers to our employees. Its 4,500 employees were equipped with some 3,000 to 4,500 units. All its employees, custodians, all have their own Apple IIIs. Yeah, they gotta have replacements. The way these Apple IIIs were failing, though, I mean, some people probably needed two. Jobs said the company lost infinite, incalculable amounts of money on the Apple III. Wozniak estimated that Apple had spent $100 million on the Apple III instead of improving the two and better competing against IBM. Pullman claimed that there was a stigma at Apple associated with having contributed to the computer. Most employees who worked on the III reportedly left Apple. The legacy. The file system and some design ideas from Apple SOS, or SOS, whatever you want to call it, but whatever. I'm going to redo that line, and I'm calling it Apple SOS. I don't give a fuck. I'm calling it Apple SOS. I'm calling it Apple SOS. Legacy. The file system and some design ideas from Apple SOS were part of Apple ProDOS and Apple GSOS, the major operating systems for the Apple II series, following the demise of the Apple III, as well as the Apple Lisa, which was the de facto business-oriented successor to the Apple III. In popular culture, at the start of Walt Disney Pictures' film Tron, lead character Kevin Flynn, played by Jeff Bridges, yes, that Jeff Bridges, is seen hacking into the Encom mainframe using an Apple III. Fun fact. Yeah, that's it. I don't have an end for this. We're gonna see how this turns out. This is harder than I thought it was gonna be. I thought this was gonna be super easy. It's actually very exhausting, but whatever. Goodbye.